Hey, what's up, and welcome back to Full Academy. One of the toughest decisions that we're always faced with in this game is which great building to work on next, especially for great buildings with similar and overlapping abilities. Just a heads up to my viewers, this is by far the most technical of all of the episodes that I've done so far, and there will be some math involved. But my advice to you is to focus on the main points that I'm making and not the numbers themselves. Also, you don't necessarily need to calculate anything because I'll provide the solutions. The main thing is to understand what the calculations are telling us. In some earlier episodes, we talked about how important developing the right supporting capabilities and income boosts are to growing your city, especially from an income and income stream perspective. And in many cases, you just need to think about what benefit or boost you're looking for, how it fits into your strategy, and then work on the great building that provides that benefit. And that's because a good number of benefits are unique to a specific great building. For example, Alcatraz is the only great building that provides troops. The Arctic Orangery is the only building that provides critical hit boost. And the Blue Galaxy is the only one that allows you to double collect. But there are also great buildings where benefits may overlap. For example, there are many great buildings that produce goods. And the Zeus, COA, CDM, and TA all provide attack. What do you do for those, and which one should you work on first? This episode will provide you with a framework or process for thinking this through. In attacking this question, our goal isn't to find a one-size-fits-all right answer on which great building you should be working on and the order in which you should work on them. Instead, we're going to focus on the thought process needed to come up with a reasonable decision that works for you. And along the way, we'll introduce some useful tools and ways of looking at things that could help. And so for this episode, we'll say that when you're trying to decide between great buildings with overlapping abilities or benefits, you should first do a side-by-side comparison of the benefits. Next, decide which benefits matter and are worth focusing on based on your own values, strategy, and playing style. And finally, if you're still having trouble deciding after doing the first two steps, then focus on the lowest hanging fruit. By that I mean, do the great building level or levels that are going to provide you with the benefit that you're looking for at the lowest cost. Let's demonstrate how this works with an example. Zeus or Terracotta Army. Which one should you work on first, and up to what level should you work up to on each of them? When it comes to these two great buildings, both have overlapping benefits because they provide attack. But if you're not careful, there are many potential mistakes that can be made, such as building the TA too early, or building it too late, leveling it up too early, or not leveling it up enough, and the list goes on and on. Some of you at home might say that I'm contradicting myself because I'm saying that people make mistakes on these all the time. Yet I've said in previous episodes that there are no one-size-fits-all right answers for every situation, playing style, and strategy. But I would argue that I am being consistent. These aren't mistakes because there is a right answer out there that everyone must follow. I've seen people make these leveling decisions. The problem is that I've seen people make these leveling decisions and have no solid justification for it. That's where the mistake lies, in making decisions that aren't really thought out. So let me apologize to my viewers for the upcoming rant. It drives me crazy when I see players making great building leveling decisions that aren't thought out at all or are arbitrary. For example, I've seen many people take their Zeus to level 61 and then take their TA to 61 as well. And when you ask them why, they have no real answers, other than that somebody told them to do it that way, or that it was nice to see all of the attack buildings at the same level. Again, that kind of drives me crazy. And the other thing that drives me crazy is focusing on level 61, because that seems completely arbitrary. Okay, enough ranting. Let's move on to the important question. Why should we care? Why am I making such a big deal about whether the Zeus should be leveled up before the TA or vice versa? It matters because it's about getting maximum benefit as quickly and as cheaply as you can to save forge points and take advantage of those great building benefits sooner, so that you can hopefully get more fights sooner, gain more rewards, and ultimately grow your city faster, if you're an attack-focused player. Now let's move on to step 1 of our analysis, which is about comparing the benefits of each great building. We see that both Zeus and TA provide attack and defense for the attacking army. But TA, interestingly, provides attack and defense for the defending army as well. The other thing that we see is that the cumulative cost of the TA is higher. If we focus on just moving from level 10 to 81 for the Zeus and TA, we see that the player will get exactly the same boost for the attacking army, 36%, but that the TA is going to give a 36% boost for the defending army as well. That means if, and I emphasize the word if the costs for all of these levels are exactly the same, then it would seem very reasonable to argue that the TA should be leveled up first, since we get a boost for both the attacking and the defending army if we work on the TA. But the thing is that the costs are not the same. If every spot gets 1.9, then the great building owner is going to pay over 28,000 more forge points to get their TA from level 10 to level 81 than they would pay for the Zeus. That's a huge difference. And again, since the costs aren't the same, a more relevant question is, first, 1, do you value the defense boost? And then 2, if so, is that 36% boost to the defending army valuable enough that you're going to spend an extra 28,000 forge points to do the TA before the Zeus? For the remainder of this example, let's put ourselves in the shoes of a developing player that is trying to boost up their attack as quickly as they can so that they can get more fights and more rewards in GBG. And because we're talking about a developing player, we need to assume that they don't have a lot of forge points just lying around. They need to make every one count. Okay, if I'm that player, I would look at this comparison and say that the boosts to the defending army are nice to have, but not a must-have. Since I'm an attack-focused player, I want to get as much attack boost as I can for the attacking army and get it as cheaply as I can. So if I'm in that kind of mindset, it's possible that I might decide to ignore the defense army boost and only focus on the attacking army's boost. And if I make that decision, then it really comes down to doing whatever I can to get the most attack for the lowest cost that I can in the short term. At this point, I want to introduce a term that's used in economic analyses: marginal costs. For our purposes, let's focus on what this means for Forge of Empires. It's the number of forge points that I'll need to spend to make my great building produce just one more of the thing that I'm interested in. In the case of the Zeus and the TA, what I'm interested in is how much is the next 1% attack boost going to cost me? Okay, so let's see how marginal costs helps us with that. Here's how the calculations work. If we take the Zeus from level 9 to level 10 using 1.9 threads, I'm going to spend 319 forge points to get 3% attack and 3% defense for the attacking army, for a total of 6% boost. So 319 divided by 6 gives me a marginal cost of 53.2 forge points. Similarly, for going from level 10 to 11, I'm going to pay 323 forge points for an extra 2% boost. So my marginal cost in that case is going to be 161.5. Now here's where things get a little bit more interesting. For all of the military great buildings, once you get to level 11, you actually have to do 2 levels to get your next 1% attack and 1% defense. So that means that you need to look at the combined costs for doing both levels. So I'm going to have to spend a combined 608 forge points, 316 to get to level 12, and 292 to get to level 13 to get my 1% attack and 1% extra defense for my Zeus. And that's why the marginal cost is going to be 304. You might ask, why does this matter? Why do I need to combine the costs of the levels? It matters because a lot of people worry about how much a level is going to cost, when what they actually should be worrying about is what they're going to get for doing that level. So for example, who cares how much the Zeus costs to go from level 11 to level 12? Because you're going to get absolutely nothing for the 316 forge points that you have to put down. What matters is that you're going to need to pay a total of 608 forge points for the extra 2% attack boost. And when we do this calculation for all of the levels for TA and Zeus, we can begin to see why this is important. What this plot is saying is that if I'm a developing attack focused player that doesn't care about the defending army boosts and only cares about increasing my boosts for the attacking army as quickly and as cost efficiently as possible, then what I can do is use these marginal cost calculations to figure out which levels of Zeus or TA to do next by always doing the levels that will give me more attack at a lower marginal cost. And that's because, again, if we put ourselves in the shoes of that attack focused player, we are completely indifferent to where our next 1% attack is coming from. It doesn't matter whether it's from the Zeus or the TA. The only thing that matters is doing the one that comes at a lower price. So let's go over some of the takeaways from this chart. It's saying that you would want to take your Zeus to level 10 to get the 30% attack boost first. But after that, it's actually more cost efficient to take the TA to level 8 to get another 16% attack. Then you go back to the Zeus and go from level 10 to 11 because the marginal cost is lower. Then take the TA to level 10. At that point, there may be some players out there that would level both the Zeus and the TA up together and move them up both one level at a time. There are also people out there that are giving advice that the Zeus should be taken to level 61 and the TA to 61 as well. But for that, I would say, again, for the attack focused player who doesn't care about the boost to the defending army, the more efficient path is actually to take the Zeus to level 67, then take the TA to level 11, then take the Zeus to level 81, and then move the TA to level 65. Again, I'm sure some of my viewers are wondering, why does this matter? And some of you might also be thinking that this is too complicated and that it's much simpler and easier to just level them both up to 61 or something like that. So here's my response to that. If you have a huge stash of forge points in your bank, then it probably doesn't matter because you'll probably end up doing the same number of total levels on your Zeus and your TA in the long run. But again, if you're a forge point strapped developing player that wants to get the most bang for their buck, then this is going to help you out a lot. Take a look at this. On the left, I've calculated the cost of doing something simple, like taking the Zeus up to 61 and then the TA up to 31. By doing that, the owner will spend 27,568 forge points and boost up their attack by 87%. But if you follow what I outlined earlier, which is not working on the TA until you get the Zeus to 81, then you could do 2 more levels and get an extra 1% attack boost and save about 600 forge points. I think that's a pretty good deal. Okay, I'm sure that some of you are wondering about the military trio of Zeus, COA, and CDM, and what's the most efficient order for leveling those buildings after you get them all to level 10. Overall, I would say that the process is exactly the same. We go through exactly the same steps of comparing the buildings, deciding which benefits matter and are most important to us, and then, if needed, we figure out what order makes the most sense on a marginal cost of attack basis. The challenge when dealing with these buildings is that the comparison and benefit questions do get a little harder. Let's talk about the benefits. So, all of these buildings provide attack and defense for the attacking army. So there's the area of overlap. But the Zeus only provides attack, whereby the COA also gives coins, and the CDM gives forge points. Now I know that a lot of people recommend doing the CDM first because it provides forge points. But I honestly think that that's kind of a lazy way of evaluating things. The reason why is because it doesn't take into consideration the type of player that we're dealing with, the true benefit that those extra forge points might provide, and the cost difference between the buildings. In other words, how much extra are we going to pay to get the extra daily forge points that the CDM provides? So let's compare the buildings. Leveling the Zeus from level 11 to level 67 is going to cost the owner 9,476 forge points if they use 1.9 threads. And it will increase their attack boost by 25%. So 9,476 forge points, you could say then is the cost of that 25% extra attack boost. Now we can get the exact same amount of attack boost by leveling the COA from 10 to 67 instead of doing the Zeus. But as you can see from this slide, from this chart, the price of doing that is an extra 1,500 forge points. And what do you get for those 1,500 extra forge points? The answer is an extra 160,000 coins per day. We can apply the same reasoning to the CDM. You're going to get the 25% attack and an extra 30 forge points per day. And the cost of that extra 30 forge points per day is about 3,000 additional forge points. So that was actually the easy part of the evaluation. Now comes the hard part. What does it mean to the player themselves, and how quickly or slowly can they take advantage of these benefits? On one hand, if we are dealing with a player that farms and does minimal fighting, then the CDM may be the better option. Doing that first may be the better option because you'll be able to recoup the extra forge points that it will cost to work on the CDM over time with the extra forge points per day that it's going to provide. And after that, you can work on the COA because it gives you coins. Yes, you could say that the Zeus is a cheaper source of attack than the COA or CDM, but since you're not a fighter, that may not matter. But let's consider the other extreme. A relatively new, attack-focused player that fights a lot in GBG and is in a guild that will provide them with even more fighting opportunities if only they can boost their attack more. For this kind of player, every bit of additional attack boost is going to make a big difference. And if they're able to get at least 30 to 40 additional fights per day in GBG, the extra forge point rewards from those fights should at least be 30 plus forge points per day, which is what you would get if you leveled the CDM all the way up. So the bottom line is that the attack-focused player may very well be interested in the cheapest source of attack so that they can fight more in GBG, earn more rewards, and then use those rewards to invest more in their attack great buildings. Now, I definitely fell into this category of the attack-focused player, and by the time I got my Zeus into the 60s, I was getting about 3,000 to 5,000 fights per season. And so I was able to use the GBG income that I would of about 300 to 500 forge points per day that I got to level up my Zeus, COA, and CDM within 2 months of each other. And because this time gap between each of these buildings was relatively small, it reduces the opportunity cost of not leveling up the CDM sooner. That is, we know that a leveled up CDM would provide more forge points per day than a level 11. If the gap between the Zeus leveling and the CDM leveling were, say, 6 months, then one could argue that you're missing out on a lot of forge points and that doing the CDM first was the way to go. But if the gap is less than 2 months, then it's not as big a deal, especially if leveling the CDM instead of the Zeus was going to cost you 3,000 more forge points to do. Now, just as we did for the Terracotta Army versus Zeus debate, let's again put ourselves in the head of a newer, developing, attack-focused player who is capable of taking any additional attack boost that they're going to get and then monetizing it quickly to get more fights and more rewards in GBG. Again, context is important. So if you don't fall into this category, the main thing is just to follow along with the thinking process used in these decisions and then adapt them to your own game. So if you are that attack-focused player, you may decide that cheap attack is what's most important for you, as opposed to the forge points that you're going to get from the CDM or the coins that you'll get from the COA. And if you go in this direction, you can again rely on those marginal cost of attack calculations and focus on doing whatever great building levels are going to provide the next 1% attack boost at the lowest cost. So if we follow this chart here with the updated marginal costs for all of the different 4 great buildings, and always work on the great building with the lowest marginal cost of attack, then here's the sequence that you would use. The key levels that I want to point out are that after you have your Zeus, CDM, and COA at level 11, and your TA is at level 10, then the marginal costs would suggest or dictate that you take the Zeus up to level 67, because any 2 Zeus levels, such as 11 to 13, 55 to 57, and 65 to 67, are going to come at a cost that is lower than taking the COA or CDM from 11 to 13, or the TA from 10 to 11. Now, after getting the Zeus to 67, then you work on the COA to level 65 and the CDM to 63. Then take the TA to level 11. But don't do any levels after that because it's more cost efficient to get the Zeus to level 60, the Zeus to level 81, the COA to 77, and the CDM to 73. Only then do you take the TA to 65. And that's what the marginal cost of attack plot and calculations suggest. So I know that this is a lot to take in, and I'm sure that there are players that will disagree with the sequence and would do it a different way. But again, I'm not recommending that all players do this. Context matters, and the only player that I would possibly be recommending this to is that developing attack-focused player that values cheap attack over coins and forge point benefits, and that is capable of quickly capitalizing on these extra attack boosts to get more fights and rewards, which they can then reinvest in more great building levels and have an even shorter time gap between leveling up the Zeus, the COA, and the CDM. Like I said, the time gap for me between all three buildings was about 2 months. I've just included this slide to show that you can also calculate marginal costs for other things, like goods. So for example, here is a comparison of the Galata and the Lighthouse of Alexandria. I'm not going to work this problem or question, but just leaving it here for you to see that it is possible. In summary, my general recommendation to all players is to have a well thought out process for deciding what great building levels you're going to work on, especially when it comes to great buildings with overlapping benefits. And so that involves, first, considering the benefits of each great building. Second, figuring out how you're going to weigh and value those benefits based on your own strategy and how you play the game. And then finally, figuring out what levels you're going to work on and the order that you're going to work on them. And if you receive advice, make sure that you understand the rationale behind it. I've said before that there is a lot of bad advice floating out there, and one of those pieces of advice that I am not a fan of is the idea of leveling your Zeus, COA, and CDM up to level 61, because it seems completely arbitrary. And perhaps you picked up on this when I was going over the marginal costs of attack, plot, and numbers, but there is nothing magical about level 61. And I can't see anything in the numbers that suggests that that is the place that you should stop, other than that it seems like a nice number. So that's it for this episode on great buildings with overlapping benefits. Again, I know that this was the most technical of all of my episodes and that there is a lot to take in. And if you're brave enough, perhaps you may even want to watch some parts of it a few times. But it is my hope that this has helped to raise your awareness of the strategies and thought processes that go into these decisions, and that it will ultimately help you to think better and play smarter in your game. Until next time, take care and happy forging. And please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel.